Hello everyone out there, if you can see or hear me, because it's pretty loud out here. This is Side Pocket. I'm one of the co-founders of, so I can take this off temporarily, DEFCON 201. I'm here at one of my favorite hangouts, and then there's Lucky 13 Saloon out in Brooklyn. It was a little hell to get here simply because of the amount of, let's see where we can get some decent backlight. There we go, right over here, even though the music's loud. This will work. Yeah, it was hell getting here thanks to all the weather and stuff, hence why I'm wearing the industrial suit, but I'm already here for that. So, basically what's happened is, once again, I know NCommander's not been streaming for a month, but this is literally his hell month. We're getting there, though. The good thing is that all of next month in August is going to be Hacker Summercamp. So instead of it being 1 week, it's going to be an entire month. This Saturday will be the Hackers on Planet Earth conference, which will go on for 7 freaking days, with all sorts of content from Radio Statler to workshops to so many different activist things. RightsCon also happens sometime during that. You can still get into the Black Hat USA everything except for the briefings entirely for free. And of course, next Thursday through Sunday will be DEFCON. DEFCON Safe Mode Online. And during our meetup, which is the third Friday of every month, I believe that's August 21st, will be the Diana Initiative conference, as well as the Google CTF. So this is just going to be like jam-packed of everything as the synthwave music plays in the background. So basically what we decided to do in order to fill the time here is we are going to play you 3 different videos. Cyrusel is going to take the helm between each video, but I'm going to introduce the first one. The first video, if you've ever seen our Hack Alt NCommander, this is like appropriate music here with the organ. Hack Alt NCommander text versions on our blog. You will no doubt know about his other exploits that he hasn't filmed, and the first one is going to be about workgroups for Windows and the differences between the 2 versions. So take it away, Digital NCommander.
If, like me, you were a child of the 90s, the following is likely a familiar sight and sound. However, you might be more familiar with a slightly different version. Windows for Workgroups, also known as Windows 3.11, began appearing 2 years before Windows 95 would hit store shelves. For me, personally, it came pre-installed on a Packard Bell system I got for Christmas. As a kid, I often wondered, what was the difference between this and the copy of Windows 3.1 that was on my dad's PC? As it turns out, there are actually quite a few differences. Comparing a default install side by side, the 2 versions, at least at first glance, appear indistinguishable. As you can see on screen, a few applications got minor UI tweaks. For example, Print Manager now has a more modern toolbar, but on the whole, there isn't that much of a difference. On a fresh install, the largest change is the new Network group, which on a default install only has 4 applications: Net Setup, Microsoft Mail, Schedule Plus, and Remote Access Service. Windows for Workgroups is actually the combination of 2 separate products rolled into one, specifically the Windows 3.11 upgrade and the Microsoft Workgroup add-on for Windows. Let's talk about the 3.11 upgrade first. By itself, the 3.11 upgrade had a relatively small number of bug fixes and changes from the base version, and it was essentially a service pack. This, of course, leaves us with the other half of the equation, specifically the 4 workgroups part. Unless you worked out of a high-tech office, the odds are that most Windows users of the era would have no idea what this referred to or what it meant. So let's step back and talk about the original Microsoft Workgroup add-on, which was available for both DOS and Windows as an expansion and replacement of Microsoft's original LAN Manager client. Throughout the late 80s and 90s, companies like Novell and Sun Microsystems would compete for network dominance with their own products. These solutions were often incompatible with each other, and furthermore had to run through DOS, which in turn slowed the system down and often led to crashes and system instability. Recognizing a legitimate problem, Microsoft created the Windows Sockets API, or WinSock, that provided a common foundation for all network-based applications on Windows, Windows for Workgroups would be the first consumer version with integrated network and WinSock support. Furthermore, Microsoft had decided that their networking products should support peer-to-peer mode. Instead of requiring a central server like NetWare, every system could share resources directly without a central management server. The practical upshot is you only needed 2 or more copies of Windows to have a fully functional file and print server setup, drastically reducing the barrier to entry. Assuming a proper network card is installed, the NetSetup application is all that's needed to bring this potential to bear. For this video, I set up 3 separate instances of Windows named Lab, Dev, and FileServe to simulate a 3-computer network. The network installation is straightforward, but there are oddities. Workgroups supports a large number of network technologies, but only NetBIOS and Novell's IPX are installed by default. TCP/IP was available as a free add-on, however. After restarting, the first notable change is Windows asking for a login. The login entered here is used to store the password database and authenticate against LAN manager servers. Furthermore, the Networks Applications group now has several other programs listed and a new network control panel. A quick check with Wireshark shows that Windows is in fact successfully communicating with the network, including using NetBIOS over IPX, a true product of its time. Now that we're fully up and running, let's walk through the basics. File Manager now has an option to share folders as well as mount network drives. Windows did not support UNC-Pass at the time, so any network share had to be mounted to a drive letter. The standard Open and Save dialog gained a network button to make this easier as well. Likewise, Print Manager gained similar functionality. A few less obvious things also gained network functionality. For example, Clipboard Viewer, as the name suggests, lets you view the current contents of whatever you copied last. However, there is now the Clipbook, which lets you store multiple snippets in one place. The network bit, however, comes into play from the fact that you could share multiple clipbooks over the network, creating a de facto database of knowledge. Hearts, which first appeared in this version of Windows, could also be played with up to 3 other players on the network. However, moving on to the network program group, let's start with Microsoft Mail. On first startup, Mail asked if you want to create a post office, which is a shared folder that holds the Mail database. As Mail was included with Windows for Workgroups out of the box, and versions of it were also available for DOS and OS/2, it made for a quick and easy Office Mail solution. As I've already created a post office on FileServe, I'll simply connect to that, where you can see I have a few test messages. Microsoft Mail would eventually evolve into the modern day Exchange and Outlook, and I intend to do a follow-up video exploring it more in depth in the near future. Continuing with the trend of applications that would evolve over time, Schedule Plus, as the name suggests, was a networked schedule. It integrated with the post office used by Mail to share data, although it could also be used in a standalone fashion. Amusingly, it chokes on years later than 2019, thus I had to turn the clock back to get this to work. Once running, the level of integration is clear as user lists are shared between the 2 products. Meeting invites could be shared between users, and there was a built-in messaging function as well. More interestingly, the product had a fairly advanced access control feature for this era. This is likely to prevent people from canceling meetings they did not want to attend. Having covered the primary productivity tools included, let's take a look at the miscellaneous utilities. Remote Access Service is the only program I can't demonstrate, as I cannot easily emulate a serial modem. What it did is fairly easy to explain, however. RAS would allow a remote user to dial into Windows NT or LAN Manager servers and then be able to use file sharing, network, and other NetBIOS applications. Note that I didn't say network applications. RAS only supported Microsoft's own NetBIOS protocol and has no support for TCP/IP. As such, it could not be used by home users to access the internet. Continuing down the line, log on and off was used to sign in and out of the Windows network. This is the same login prompt seen when we first started Windows and is different from Mail or Schedule Plus's login. It was primarily useful if you had to switch between various networks. Speaking of different networks, NetWatcher allowed you to get a peek at who was talking to your computer, as well as potentially any files they had locked open. It is also where the event log was hidden, which could record system startup, shutdown, and remote access attempts. As for notifications, anyone who's used Windows XP might be familiar with WinPop-up or Messenger Service, as it was called in later versions of Windows. In short, it lets you send a message to another computer that would pop up on screen. Before it was removed in Windows Vista, Win Pop-Up was primarily used by system administrators to announce messages and viruses to cause network spam. Speaking of notifications, chat does exactly what it sounds like. Finally, WinMeter shows various performance statistics, and with that, we can close out our brief tour of Windows for Workgroups. In closing, it's interesting to see how much Microsoft actually gave you in the box. However, many of these features would disappear over the years. It is clear that Microsoft's intent was to push out its competition, primarily Novell NetWare, out of the market by simply including their competitors' functionality right out of the box. This practice would eventually get them in trouble with the US Department of Justice, but that's a story for another day. As usual, if you've enjoyed this look at early 90s technology, please leave a like and subscribe. It really does make a difference. If you want to follow my adventures in real time, please follow me on Twitter or join me in Discord. The links are in the description. Until the next time, this is NCommander signing off. Have a great day.
So, Cyro here. That was NCommander with a... Oh, that's loud. Crank that down a little bit. Anyway, that was NCommander with Windows for Workgroups 3.11. Interesting technology. Too bad we have NT now, so whatever. We have another feature from NCommander. Actually, let's see what's the title on that one right now. All I have is NCommander 2. I guess that's, oh yeah, that's NetWare. Alright, so without further ado, I'm going to cue that up and we shall be ready to go. So, stay tuned, you are watching DC201 TV.
Coming off our last video, where we explored Windows for Workgroups, I mentioned that Novell NetWare products were the 900-pound gorilla in the corner. Later, during the Hack Alt NCommander stream, hosted by DEFCON 201 of New Jersey, I got involved with exploring NetWare live on camera for the first time. Since then, I've had time to read through the documents provided in lovely hypertext form while trying to learn the nuts and bolts of how to actually administrate this monster. So let's fire up the DeLorean and go back to 1993. I'm your host, NCommander, and if you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. Let's step back a moment and actually explain what NetWare is. In short, it's a dedicated network operating system that was available for 286 and 386 processors of the era. It did one thing and did it well, and that was provide fast and reliable print services using Novell's IPX protocol. Unlike DOS, NetWare could take full advantage of the 286's protected mode without concerning itself over backwards compatibility. Furthermore, NetWare clients were available for DOS, OS/2, Macintosh, and even Unix-based operating systems of that era. A large part of Novell's marketing at the time was showing, yes, it runs NetWare. NetWare's popularity began to wane through the 90s as Microsoft began aggressively pushing Windows NT as a cheaper alternative, and the world began to move away from the concept of a dedicated network operating system. Even a port of NetWare Server to OS/2 did nothing to stop Novell's decline, and by mid-2000s, it was often nothing more than a forgotten memory. Windows NT would take the crown of king of office file sharing. The full story of NetWare's fall for glory is a story for another day, though. For the moment, I want to focus on what the NetWare experience is actually like. For this video, I went with NetWare 3.12, which was released in 1993 and was contemporary with Windows 3.1 and Windows for Workgroups. NetWare's installation process has changed over the years. Up until version 2.0, NetWare was able to boot directly from a hard drive using NetWare's cold bootloader. Versions 3 through 5 require loading into DOS before chaining into NetWare. The final release, NetWare 6, then restored the cold boot version. As such, either a boot disk or a small DOS partition is required to use NetWare. I installed MS-DOS 6 to a 32 MB partition, and left the rest of the disk space unallocated for NetWare. This version of NetWare shipped on both floppy disks and CD-ROM, so Oak CD-ROM was added to DAWs to take advantage of the latter. Installation is started by simply running the install program from the CD. This copies the base NetWare files and server to the DAWs partition. Installation at this point is continued within NetWare itself. The first step is loading the ISA disk driver, which tells NetWare that we are using an AT-compatible hard drive. This is followed by the load install command. Install handles disk partitioning, system installation, and provides shortcuts for editing and managing autoexec.ncf and startup.ncf, the two files that control NetWare's initialization process. The free space set aside at the beginning of this video was converted to NetWare's sys partition, which, as the name suggests, holds the core system files and folders. One interesting oddity is that NetWare continues to have access to the CD-ROM device loaded under DAWs. This is due to the fact that DAWs is actually still resident in memory, and NetWare can in fact talk to DAWs devices, albeit with a massive performance penalty. The manual has a large section documenting this in detail. It took several minutes for all the files to copy across, at which point I still needed to install updates and a network adapter driver. NetWare 3.12 has several known Y2K bugs, but Novell's patch files are not hard to find. While it is theoretically possible to install patches from the DAWs boot partition, I could not get this to work. The official instructions require loading the patch files from another machine. This, of course, meant I had to get network up and running. Complicating matters, the AMD PC Net card is not supported by NetWare out of the box. Instead, the driver has to be loaded from DAWs. The driver I have is for the later NetWare 4, but it loads just fine on 3.12. The next step was configuring the system via NetWare's two main config files, which is a somewhat unintuitive process. Startup.ncf is used to handle any early actions during the DAWs startup stage, such as load ISA drive. This makes the sys partition available to NetWare, and then control passes to autoexec.ncf. Autoexec.ncf, on the other hand, runs once the NetWare kernel is fully up and running. Here we need to load the IPX driver and bind it to localhost with a network identifier in hexadecimal. This is then followed by loading the PCNet driver, binding IPX to that interface, and selecting the IPX frame type and providing a separate network number. While this is all documented in the installation manual, it still took several attempts to actually end up with a working system. The unintuitive nature of NetWare would foreshadow what happened next. At this point though, we can load monitor, which shows various statistics and shows that IPX is in fact loaded on our PCNet card. A quick check with Wireshark also shows that we are in fact successfully talking to the network. It's at this point an ugly truth shows up. Beyond basic setup, it's impossible to administrate a NetWare server from the server console alone. Besides install and monitor, the only tool of a user interface is edit, which doesn't even provide a file listing. Likewise, dir and similar commands simply do not exist. For that, we would need to move to a client system with the Novell NetWare client installed. Once again, MS-DOS 6 was installed, followed by Windows 3.1. The Novell NetWare client 3.12 was also installed, as this version was included with the server disks. Like the server, support for the PCNet NIC was not included in the default install. This was compounded by the fact that the NetWare client installer did not detect the driver disk, likely due to the client drivers being for a later client version. Nonetheless, I was able to get this to work after copying files and manually editing net.config to properly bind IPX. After a restart, a lot of messages are printed on screen as the NetWare client successfully loads. It was at this point NetWare's unintuitive nature reemerged. Aside from a few small programs, there was no client applications immediately available in NetWare client. More reading led me to discover that, by default, a Novell NetWare requester mounts the login utility on the F drive. With it, I could log in as supervisor. At this point, it was time to install patches on the server. The collection of patches I have exists in the form of self-extracting archives, and each are installed in a different manner. The main system patch is 312 NTD, which requires its directories to be copied to NetWare and then load patch 312 to be run on the server console to actually install it. In contrast, the Y2K patch required replacing files on the sys partition manually, then the NetWare server must be downed, replacement files copied to the DOS boot partition, and then finally running lswap to replace code within server.exe. After restarting, the date code properly comes up as 2020. Returning back to the NetWare client, NetWare file paths can be mapped to local drive letters via the map command. A graphical user interface is also provided in the form of the session command. New mappings are created with the insert and delete keys, something not pointed out by the user interface and would trip me up later. Group broadcast messages are also available from session. In addition, there's a GUI interface for it under Windows that lets you map and manage network shares. More unintuitive behavior quickly became apparent, however. Mappings changed in Windows persist when returning to a DOS environment. While this mechanism works, more confusion reigns in the fact that NetWare Client for Windows has the ability to make drive shares permanent. To clarify, a permanent share is one that is automatically made available and connected on system startup. While this may seem like a more user-friendly alternative, these shares are only automatically mapped when Windows starts up. As such, a typical user may have had to start Windows before exiting to DOS to use NetWare successfully. This is supposedly mitigated by the fact that NetWare supports and recommends the use of login scripts, which are essentially batch files that run on the client when the user logs in. These are supposed to be set by the network administrator to set up drive mappings for individual users using the map command, as well as perform actions like modifying the path variable. Now, I do want to emphasize a fact. I am intentionally using an older Novell client. This client was contemporary with this version of the server and would have been common on DOS and Windows machines of the era. Later clients, at least in theory, improved many of the aspects of the user experience and the administrative tools I'm going to demonstrate. However, it also needs to be said that this was competing directly against Windows NT and Windows for Workgroups, which were both cheaper and had a much better user experience. A final wrinkle I discovered was that permanent shares are set on a global basis. If your computer was used by multiple users, the NetWare client might try to mount shares that you don't have permissions to use. The patching process may have foreshadowed it, but if the user experience for NetWare 3 was poor, the administrative one was not much better. Starting from the most basic utilities, NDIR lists files on a network drive, while NCopy allows copying files within a network server. While it is possible to do this with just standard DOS commands, these two programs bypass the network entirely and are also essential for managing Macintosh and Unix files. The server console could also be accessed via rconsole. However, this required running load remote beforehand. The RSPX module must also be loaded for administration over a network. rconsole gives a one-to-one copy of whatever is on the server console screen. This is useful for checking monitor or installing add-on software. rconsole also provides additional functionality in and of itself, hidden by pressing the star key on the numeric keypad. Multiple servers can be managed at once through select a screen, and a remote directory viewer allows NetWare drives to be viewed. The transfer of files to server works as you may expect, although it's not as useful as it appears at first glance. Directories are not copied recursively, which prevents it from being used for tasks like copying patch directories. Copy system and public files may look familiar, as we saw this option in install. Simply put, it's a mechanism for loading some NetWare software, for example, online help. I did not, however, use it during the production of this video. Finally, shell to operating system simply opens a DOS command line, although it is not possible to switch back to rconsole without exiting DOS first. Another essential program is syscon, or the system console. Syscon is responsible for managing users, trust permissions, and also allows the use of an optional accounting package for handling billing. It was at this point I needed to consult the NetWare documentation. Although it was easy to see the pre-existing supervisor and guest accounts, adding a new user stumped me. Once again, the secret is to hit the insert key on the keyboard, which then pops open the necessary prompts to let me add an NCommander user. This prompts to create the user home directory and then provides menus for customizing user permissions as well as setting groups and other relevant information. Both the system and user login scripts can also be set with this utility. NetWare actually has fairly advanced access control lists, and the official manual recommends creating paper worksheets to work out various permissions for various shares. One interesting feature of note was the execute only flag, which prevents an application from being directly read or copied by any user, even supervisor. The manual clearly states that backups must be kept as once sent, execute only cannot be removed. Another useful utility is Filer, which acts as a graphical file manager. Access controls can also be manipulated here, and for mixed environments, non-DOS files can also be viewed and managed. This also acts as a supplement to the command line ndir, ncopy, and flag utilities. fconsole, on the other hand, allows the administrator to view who is connected and what files they have open. There are a lot more commands in the base network install, such as those related to printer management, connecting to the bretrieve SQL server, or even making a network bootable DAWs image. As we explore NetWare in future videos, we'll take a look at these as they come needed. Diving into NetWare has been something of a journey. Despite the user experience being less than ideal, NetWare itself is a solid piece of software, and it was rock solid throughout my testing. In addition, its IPX network protocol meant that NetWare clients were essentially plug and play. There was no fiddling with DNS or other common network tasks required. The problem is that presentation often trumps functionality. On that note, I do hope to explore later versions of NetWare, as well as demonstrate its competition in the form of both LAN Manager and early Windows NT. If you're interested in seeing more, hit that subscribe button, follow me on Twitter, or hit me up on Discord. Until the next time, this is NCommander, signing off.
Alright, so Cyro back again. Heyo. Next video is our talk that we presented at PAX East this past year. And it was quite interesting. We had a big crowd. We recorded it, never really got a chance to upload it. And yeah, so I'm just gonna take this opportunity to play that talk. So without further ado, let's press start. Hold. Oh wait, is this even connected? Hold on, let me check my other game console. Joy-Con left. This button, right? That should do it. Yep.
Can't breathe.
Alright.
Okay, good. Oh my God, Rich, thank God. Yep. Okay, so who's ready for some video game hacking? So, before we get into all of this, unfortunately, because we mentioned lawyers kind of got to us first, so we just want to do some clarification and disclaimers. If you were expecting us to be like, hey, we're going to drop some major 0 day for Animal Crossing, even though it somehow hasn't come out yet, that's not going to happen. Not because we're not like technical or anything, but more of just that if you try to poke the demo gods, they will send bees at you. So that's why we have a lot of interesting videos to show you guys. Everything that we show you here is public research. This stuff you can easily find on the internet. We do, however, caution that please don't try to do this at home, because
Unless you know what you're doing, like very well.
yes, because
You will break your system.
you can break your system, you can break your network, you can break one of your friends.
You'll cause demons to fly out of your game console.
Living together.
And pigs. Yeah, forget pigs. So we know that's a just tired remark, but don't worry, we're almost near the end of this. Doesn't keep from trying. We won't be held responsible if you do try to do stuff. So again, just can't repeat enough. Please at your own risk. Please, please. And this panel is also for education and edutainment purposes. We really hope you are entertained by this as we had making this. So just want to note, video games are the original hack. When people think of video games and hacking, a lot of times we sort of see it as like, oh man, like these new hackers who are like online trying to like bust us at Fortnite and stuff. And it's like, seriously? Because video games themselves were a hack. Ralph H. Baer, I actually was honored enough to meet him at a GDC years ago. He was futzing around with TV controls, figured out that like the outer limits say, go wiki it if you're too young, they can control the horizontal and vertical, made a chase game, and video games were born for this multi-billion-dollar industry. Before him, there's been many other experiments. William
Higginbottom.
Thank you so much, because I suck at English. Had created a video game on a oscilloscope called Tennessee 2. You can find video clips online, bounce it back and forth. Beep, boop, beep.
And that's from my hometown, by the way. It comes straight from Brookhaven. Long Island, woo!
So to note that the first video games were homebrew and not commercial. Eventually came commercial, started off by Atari and the insane person by Nolan Bushnell, who's still active. He makes cryptocurrency games now. Don't look that up. Do you want to take this first?
Yeah, so this is just my opinion, but that was a bad idea. Atari commercializing video games ruined video games. It ruined the whole thing. Everything is bad about video games now. Thus, none of you are here. I'm just imagining you guys.
Okay, so I think we sufficiently, bored all the lawyers in the audience? Okay. Alright, good. It's yourself, do the thing.
Right, so first things first, our presentation's unfortunately been rushed into production. The lawyers really made us cut a lot of content, so we don't really have too much to work with here. But I mean, I can save us. I have the.
Sorry, what happened?
Okay.
Do it.
All right. So first off, I'm gonna enter a cheat code real quick. All right. So now we're in. I gotta pull down the dev console and wait for this to load.
Don't try this at home.
Okay, and we're connected. I can now just put in the command, enable cheats, and load our actual presentation. So without further ado, this is Cheat to Win, video games from a hacker's perspective. So, I'm Cyrusville. This is NCommander over here. This is Side Pocket, and this is our special guest, Squirtle.
It was a late edition.
Yeah, kind of showed up out of nowhere, honestly. So,
I came from the wild grass. What do you want?
Yeah, I basically do a lot of graphic design stuff, hacking on the side. Side Pocket here is.
Don't forget your two big things. You're part of Switchroot. You got featured on Linus Tech Tips.
Okay, yeah, Switchroot was a project that I started to port Linux to the Nintendo Switch. Android was eventually ported as a result of that, and we maintain and keep the community strong for that. It was featured on Linux Tech Tips, and yeah, pretty exciting.
Also, if you see him at MagFest, say hi. He's one of the major people.
Yeah, I do a lot at the museum there, so I'm always there every year.
Okay, now this is closed up.
So I'm NCommander. I do a lot of things, but my biggest contribution to video games was I worked at Beam, later Mixer, and devised and designed the FTL streaming protocol for to get rid of that annoying lag when we play interactive video games.
Thank you.
Well, let's give it a Commander report.
In my free time, I work on network security and information security, and I really enjoy making certain developers just cry when I just show everything's broken. So,
Also, lots and lots of Minecraft.
well, yes. Well, there's a reason why I'm listed as Resident Evilist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So,
Let's go back.
we're
Yep,
being
there you go.
hacked. No,
Resident Evilist. There we go.
So, I guess real quick, in the hacker world, I'm usually referred to as Side Pocket. I don't know if anyone bothers to remember, but back in the Cretaceous period, I started a awesome Nintendo group in New York City called Street Pass in New York City. It was a really fun time. I got to meet Reggie and do a lot of cool promotional stuff with Nintendo. And I decided, well, Switch is coming out. I'm getting tired. I know I should start a hacking group with my roommate, and that's how DEFCON 201 was born. There's also Squirrel, but we're not going to talk about him.
We'll give them it up about 30 seconds. Go. One.
God damn it! I don't like this pressure. No, I'm Squirtle. I'm actually I used to be a professional Pokemon player back in the days of Oras. If anyone remembers Oras, back a while ago. My major contribution is mainly I just talk about Pokemon and they listen to me babble for 3 hours.
That's highly accurate.
Yes.
So, yes, we are DEFCON 201.
So, without further ado, here's a basic introduction of who we actually are.
Push start.
I'm trying.
Enter.
There we go.
Guys, did you take my red version without asking again?
Hey,
You weren't using it.
yeah.
So, yes, we did hack a Pokemon Red game where we did the section. Start going on with the base stuff. hobbyist and hacker group that meets in this terrible nexus of the universe called New Jersey. We're located in Jersey City. We meet third Friday every month. You can encounter us at, that is the most derpiest looking Porygon.
When I first saw it, I thought it was a Psyduck.
No, that's later.
That's how I look when I'm like doing website updates at 3 a.m. in the morning. But no, we meet third Friday every month. We do coding tutorials. We teach people how to pick locks. We do hardware hacking examples and have a good time at this great place called Subculture, which has Raspberry Pi video game machines and really awesome sandwiches. You can go to defcon201.org and check us out there. If you happen to brave through New Jersey, we really hope to see you guys. And how long is this demo?
It should have already been done. There we go.
Yay. Because I want to get to actual hacks. Come on, we're here for the hacks.
Okay, fine. So let me just drop this. And
Drop it like it's hot.
back to hacking. So who is DEFCON 201 anyway? We're hackers. Like he already mentioned it. We're from Jersey.
I literally have a shirt that says hacker on it.
Yeah. So this is us. Wait, wrong picture. Sorry. This is us. We did not steal a Bitcoin ATM. We did
Although
not.
I really wanted it for Christmas.
You can't have it.
I wanted it though.
The police said no.
Well, I'm on probation. Wait, listen to them?
We're in Jersey City.
Focus.
We're in Jersey City. We meet every third Friday of the month at a sandwich shop called Subculture, and we celebrate hacking. We educate people and just discuss things that are going on. And we won't hack your Facebook. We won't. We're not those kind of people.
I love the one disappointment line. when
We
you
won't
said that.
hack your girlfriend's Facebook, your boyfriend's Facebook, your ex's, etc., etc. That's illegal. That's cybercrime. Not all hackers do cybercrime. In fact, maybe a very tiny amount of them do. And to us, if you're doing cybercrime, we can't really call you a hacker.
I will say this though, we will be getting to those in a moment later on.
Yeah. So now on to some games. So first off, Nintendo. We're pretty much just starting at the end here. So the NES was Nintendo's first console. It had DRM, surprisingly. It was a chip, a lockout chip in both the console and in the cartridge called the NES CIC. It pretty much locked the games to the cartridges, to the console, and made sure that you couldn't, reproduce it. So how is it broken? Lawyers. And glitching, mostly lawyers. So a company called Tengen, which produced third-party, unauthorized Nintendo software, they had pretty much broken into Nintendo's patent portfolio by doing what anyone would do when searching for patents. Searching for patents. They found that the entire 10NES, also called the CIC chip, was documented in full on their patent portfolio, and sure enough, they were able to turn it off. Now, other bootleg producers also used a high voltage pulse to disable the hardware. We find that kind of dirty. This is a more clean, but not so clean reverse engineering. Much later on, it was clean room reverse engineered using the actual chip by microanalyzing the structures on the microchip. So the SNES and the N64 also had a CIC chip, but they were very much different in that they changed their code and completely changed the architecture as of the N64 so that multiple CIC chips existed and they couldn't cooperate with each other, and games could check the CIC periodically and break down if they got a false review. So, okay. Sega, on the other hand, played smart. They skipped right to the lawyers. So, rather than doing anything technical, they just put a chip in the boot sector of the Sega Genesis, right where the CPU would jump into where the cartridge is supposed to go. They called it the TMSS, or Trademark Security System. This produced a screen that said, produced by or under license, and it required you to put the string Sega in your cartridge. Now, this wasn't security by any stretch of the imagination. This was law they were exploiting. And I would say it was until it wasn't. Because They wanted to sue people who tried copying that Sega string, and they did. Accolade Inc. was the first lawsuit of this type, and sure enough, Accolade wins. So, the courts had found that Accolade's use of the trademark string to make the game work was perfectly fine. It was, they weren't being locked out from doing that, and there was nothing in the law that said they couldn't. Now, the Sega, on the other hand, was drop-kicked by the courts, basically. They couldn't use trademark as a copyright enforcement exercise, and that was the fact.
As insult to injury, this is still legal law in the United States because of this, and it also showed that abusing trademark cannot be used as a copyright protection scheme. This went to the Supreme Court.
Yes. So, this, among other things, led to the infamous Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
Are any of you guys who wrote that here?
Anyone been on YouTube?
Okay, good.
So, yeah, it brought us draconian policies and pretty much made it impossible for anyone to hack game consoles legally until some challenges were brought to that.
Here comes another challenger.
Homebrew games were pretty much made legal in other ways. And also, another thing to note was that preservation of games was later deemed to be important, and most of these laws were in the way of that, so the Library of Congress made exceptions to those rules. So, modern solutions led to modern hacks. Nintendo just, rather than doing anything else special, once the Wii started to hit and the DS was on, they began using more advanced cryptography, such as RSA and AES block ciphers. Microsoft and Sony as well, they produced their own protections, and with that, we produced our own breaks in the form of various methods. We'll get into one of them shortly. So suddenly there was security. Everyone was happy, there was no hacking, there was no copying, everything was, there was no piracy.
That's what they wanted you to believe.
Yeah, exactly. So, hackers enjoy challenges, and this was a challenge. Not just a challenge on a computer that we wanted to get into. So, the first entry points we had looked into were save data. We could modify it, we could change it. So,
I think
Yeah, this-
yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah, this is where I took over.
He's been excited to do this all week.
Yes. So when we came to hacking, this specifically applied to the Nintendo Wii. So one of the first things we did is the Wii is really notable on how its system security went down in flames. It was specifically bypassed with a pair of tweezers.
Modern Vintage Gamer has a really awesome video on that. I just want to quickly clarify that when we say we mean like the hacker community, and I think particularly what Fail Overflow worked on this.
Yeah, Fail Overflow were the original developers of the Homebrew channel and other exploits for the Wii.
Yes, so they have all the credit. They have amazing stuff on hackly.com, but the long and short of it is, by applying a pair of tweezers to when you insert a GameCube game into the Wii, you were able to download all the interesting security keys that Nintendo didn't want you to know, including the one for the save game encryption key. So with this, we can now decrypt and edit save games. In and of itself, interesting, but then we can take it a step further. Now, most of us who had a Wii probably remember one of the early launch titles, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, one of the more beloved Legend of Zelda games.
Minda's my bad.
Now, as it turns out, if you took a modified Twilight Princess save game and did horrible things to the horse's name, it would completely break the Wii system security and let you install the Homebrew channel. And this save affair lasted for 3 years until Nintendo learned an important lesson. Being able to fix your console is important.
Switch the slides. Yep. It's the most exercise we've gotten all day.
So yeah, the Twilight hack is probably the most famous example of this type of break on a game system. And it's not the first. Mechasalt had been the original break into the original Xbox that was publicly released. It used the save file for, obviously, Mechasalt, and the save file was curiously named Run Linux.
I wonder why. So
there's also another game that did it, but we can show that later.
Yeah, Linux on game consoles was another one of these hacker challenges, and pretty much every console since the original Dreamcast had a port of Linux to it.
Just a note for everyone who's kind of curious out there, Linux is a type of operating system that you can get for your computer that is mostly, if not all, free and open source software, meaning that anyone can share it and use it, unlike Windows and Mac OS.
So being that it's open source, anyone can modify it, and they did. They just modified the code to make it run on everything. Chances are anyone who has an Android phone is running Linux right now, and anyone who has a router in their house or any IoT devices or whatever, they're probably running Linux, probably a very old and outdated version of Linux.
So once we have that busted wide open, what should we put on it?
So what about homebrew? Woo! So early homebrew.
That started me young.
Early homebrew was very rudimentary, and piracy devices, which obviously would have developed for the intent of copying games, had often been sold under the radar as being homebrew SDKs, and this was often the case up until the N64, I want to say, because after the N64, homebrew development got a lot more professional, I want to say. Things like DevKit Pro and toolkits, which you could download on your computer and run on your own console without any special hardware, became very popular. This is an SNES copier. It's a floppy disk that just snaps onto the top of the Super Nintendo.
Someone built this.
Yeah, and that would allow you to use piracy, but it would also allow you to develop homebrew. So there was kind of a double-edged sword with that. Generally, Nintendo didn't like this. So this is pretty much where it started.
At least on the console side.
I think this slide was put in out of order. Oh well. So many successful game series had started off as homebrew on game consoles. So, for instance, do you know of anything?
Oh yeah, that's easy. The Gina sisters.
Oh yeah, the Great Gianna Sisters.
Yeah,
that started off as
it's like a Super Mario Brothers clone that eventually became its own thing.
Yeah, it was created on the Amiga originally, and a lot of bedroom coders had home computers and made games on their own home computers, and people wanted to bring that to the game consoles, and well, they did. So this is the part where we move on.
We're gonna cover a different topic here. So do you want to bring up the video list?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we covered a lot with Nintendo here. We kind of want to touch a bit on like what Sony was doing, and you have more experience in this. How do you want to start? Yeah. You can talk here if you want.
Yeah, okay. So, it may be hard to believe, but there was a time where Sony was really friendly to the homebrew and independent developer company, and this lasted up until about 10 years ago. Maybe just due to their famous falling out with Nintendo, which is a talk in and of itself. But anyway, when the PlayStation first came out, about a year after its release, there was a special version of it called the NetBurosy, which was an all-black PS1 that would connect to a Microsoft DOS-compatible computer, just to give you an idea of the era. And what this version of the PlayStation 1 would do is it would let you write games on your computer, download them to your PlayStation, and then be able to execute them. And then Sony had this entire support infrastructure where you could communicate with other developers, upload code, and communicate them. And a lot of people in the industry got their start with that. And a few games from the net,
Yeah, no, it's kind of like it's Steam Early Access, but it actually had good products.
I wasn't going to say that.
I'll say it.
Okay. Anyway, so from that starting point, because the intent of the project was to bring the PlayStation where home computers were, that you could program yourself, they decided, let's go a step further.
I can take this right. Basically, like, to put some context, Nintendo, because they were trying to resuscitate the market and they were the big dogs at the time, were extremely controlling, and that's why Sega's and Sony's policies were more towards that, oh, are they trying to restrict developer tools? Let's just give them out and things like that. So when they did the NetBurosy across the world, I used to see at the back issues of EGM, I think it's EGM2, and be like, I want one of those. So when they were like, okay, this works for PlayStation, let's take this a step further, and they basically introduced Linux for PlayStation 2. And the way this works is that you got a kit, and it came with 2 discs, one that boots Linux and one that installs Linux. And so you put the disc in. You also needed the Ethernet HDD Internet adapter, working hard drive, and a memory card. So once you got that all in, you would put the disc in, and it would change through, and then Linux would start loading and doing its thing. And then the next thing you know, you actually have your own operating system, and you can go and web browse and stuff like that. Anything you would do on a computer, graphic artistry, games, you could do that. You could also even program your own games. They use their own programming language for that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Roughly speaking, the PlayStation 2 for Linux was about the same power as Sony's official development kit, the PS2 tool, albeit with no support. And all you needed was an off-the-shelf PlayStation 2 and the Linux kit, which was about $150, I think?
Right, yes. And because of that type of price, it was a weird thing that Cyrsil's going to talk about that actually happened.
Yeah. So before September 11th, 2001, Saddam Hussein was really a bogeyman in pretty much everyone's American lives. And he went and bought a shipment of thousands of PlayStation 2 systems with the Linux development kit. And back then, the PS2 was a very powerful system compared to a lot of home computers. Along with the emotion engine, the vector processors built into it, the graphic synthesizer, and the way it could feed data across a 128-bit bus, was incredible. And very good for things like missile computers and simulating nuclear fallout. And needless to say, the army was concerned, and the media got even more concerned.
So just imagine that, like, if you were in like a battalion in the early Second Iraq War and a missile came towards you, that might have actually been guided by a PlayStation 2 game console.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was low power too, so it was great.
And well, great in terms of the device works, not the results of it.
Well, yeah, application-wise.
Sorry, we end up getting into these things. So, unfortunately, because of that, somebody went, okay, so that experiment worked. Maybe the Saddam thing, not so much, but this would work. Let's take another further. And so, if you got an early PlayStation 3, it actually came with a function called Other OS, which would allow you, without any buying that, remember all that kit in the PlayStation 2 Linux hardware? This was just right off the system itself. So, as he puts the Tux guy on, you just burned a copy of Linux onto a disk, stuck it in there, run up Other OS, and we just start installing Linux. And you can just have a desktop computer. One of the first companies that did this, they partnered with, was Yellow Dog.
Yep.
Linux.
Yeah, and Sony even went as far as partnering with the largest Linux vendor at the time, Canonical, for Ubuntu. They were very determined to support this product. They also were supporting with IBM because this had the Cell microprocessor, and this was big. This was on the box of the thing.
This is basically probably why they unfortunately engineered the PlayStation 3 to be a server blade that ends up playing games.
Yes, that is in, and Blu-ray did play.
Yes. So you're probably wondering, wow, all this stuff is amazing. Like, why can't I get a refurbished PlayStation 3 and run this? Or why doesn't PlayStation 4 just run Linux? Spoiler, it can, just not officially. We will get to that in a bit. But there's a reason why we don't have that anymore, and it's from a guy named GeoHot. Does anyone remember this story out in the audience? Raise a hand.
Ooh.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, especially because there was a swear word in it, we were going to show you a hilarious video of this guy who now runs a multi-million-dollar AI company, rapping about being sued by Sony when he was a teenager. But we figured we already subjected you to one horrible rap video. We don't want to do another. So you can go look it up on YouTube though, it's hilarious. So GeoHots, funny enough, he actually was raised in Hackensack, New Jersey. New Jersey, woo! You're starting to notice a pattern here of crazy people and computers in New Jersey. And what made him interesting is that he did a lot of hacking when he was really young. If I remember correctly, at 17, he did the first ever real jailbroken iPhone at 17.
Sold for like $100,000 or $1 million, I can't remember.
Yeah, he got rewarded for that. It's the first what we call bug bounty, where you find issues and get rewarded for it by the company. So he decided, oh, I'm a wizard genius. I should jump over. What's it? PS3 I want in my house. Let's try that. And so he figured out a major vulnerability. Do you have any?
Yeah, I can describe this.
Yeah.
So one disadvantage to Other OS on the PlayStation 3 was it locked out some of the 3D effects and parts of the security model. So
Yeah,
it would.
you couldn't access the full system when you.
It disabled the graphics card, and the hypervisor was still running, and kept you from using 2 of the 7 available SPEs.
Right. The reason for this is so that people still would have reason to buy Sony's dev kits and do licensing and so forth. GeoHot's managed to break this, and Sony decided, and removed the other OS feature from the up-and-coming PlayStation 3 Slim, and then pushed a software update to remove it from the original PS3.
This made people angry.
And if there's one group of people you do not want to piss off, it is the hacker community. Now, there's a more side story. Up to this point, the PlayStation 3 had been on the market for about 4 to 5 years. Its copy protection had not been broken. This is not true of the 360 or the Wii, which went down in flames within 6 months. This is about to change.
Yeah, so the PS3, even after GeoHots had hacked the hypervisor running other OS, it was still not really easy to copy games, run pirated material, or just run your own homebrew within the game OS. You still had to run through other OS. It was a bit contrived.
Yeah. So remember that group that we talked about earlier with Twilight Princess Fail Overflow?
Yeah, so Fail Overflow comes back into the picture and begins developing vulnerabilities and exploits to get into the PS3.
Start ripping the system to shreds.
They don't publish their things because they didn't want to enable piracy. They thought that it was a noble motive to not do so. And people were still upset, and people got upset at Fail Overflow for doing the right thing.
And
so,
GeoHots basically said, F it, we'll do it live.
Yeah,
And
so
released all the root codes for it.
yeah, GeoHots published the codes, the keys to the 3.4 or 3.1 something hypervisor.
Metal Loader was what he popped.
Oh, MetLoader. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the MetaLoader, basically, it's the first, the second bootloader.
First.
Really?
Yeah, to
Yeah.
start the system. Yeah.
So the key that used was now out in the open, but nobody could really use it at home because you needed to attach hardware to the NAND chip and do various weird things. And well, some Chinese hackers wanted piracy to happen, and a feature of the PS3. A feature of the PS3, which was actually a good idea at the time, was that if you had a PS3 that had software damage, it could be sent back to Sony for repair, and they had what was called a jig to reset to factory defaults and basically unlock the console to the point that it was at the factory for reverting it back to
Basically, everything is open during the factory, and then they lock it up and shift it to consumers. This brought it back to that point, which means, hey, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, so that jig had gotten leaked, and immediately had been reverse engineered by some weird Chinese hackers. I don't know who they are. And eventually a solution was sold as the PS jailbreak. And some of you might remember when this PS jailbreak got out and how quickly it sold out, and then people were scalping the prices for 20, 30 times what it was originally. You'd see them going for thousands of dollars.
Long story short, basically, Sony had a conniption and started to sue businesses for time. Basically did giant lawsuits for GeoHots and Fail Overflow, and they eventually settled out of court, where basically GeoHots got to live the hacker movie dream of not being able to work on Sony products in the future.
Yeah. I don't think they actually sued Fail Overflow, did they?
No, they didn't. It was just GeoHots.
It was just GeoHots, yeah.
But
now they wrote them into.
there is one final bit of the story that has to be.
Go ahead.
Okay.
When the PS3 was hacked, they discovered that Sony had implemented the internals so poorly that the developer-only PSN net leaked, and every game was hackable. This is the reason why for about 3 to 4 months, PlayStation Online games went poof, and we all got complimentary games from when Sony finally brought the service back.
And they had the 3 people bow and everything. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. So the long story short is, don't piss off the hacker community. It won't end well.
And before we finish up this section, again, like I said, there was this amazing history with PlayStation having Linux support. Really sucks that doesn't happen today. Oh wait, you can actually do that because a bunch of groups are doing. Don't play the video yet.
Sorry.
That's fine. Groups like Fail Overflow have managed to basically figure out the PS4, and it's actually quite simple. Who has been on like a Reddit or God forbid NeoGAF and you heard the phrase, oh, like modern systems like the upcoming PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, that they're basically souped up mid-range PCs. Turns out they actually are. I'll let him go ahead, but basically, for example, if you look at the kernel, the core operating system for PlayStation 4, it's literally, it was a version 9 FreeBSD, and there's just a couple of functions added just to make it a PlayStation 4, and that's it.
So this exploit starts off with WebKit, which is in pretty much everything. It's a very basic web browser engine, and everything implements it. Goes from WebKit to a kernel exploit to running Linux.
And that's why you can do things like this, if you can play it.
Is he gonna?
Yep.
I know, he's gonna play it.
So he's actually, this is its hack, he's running the operating system of like, oh, what can I do here? And how about playing your entire Steam library off of your PlayStation 4?
Yeah. Markn42 is amazing. Go follow him on Twitter, by the way.
So yeah,
Yeah, basically you can just run Steam on a PS4 because it's running the same architecture as a modern PC. It's x86-64, and it has an AMD graphics chip in it, and all the drivers are all
and that's why we
there.
can't wait for the next systems to come out, because we've already seen with the Nintendo Switch, it's basically a tablet, you can make it into a tablet, and I can't. Okay. But obviously we probably let something out. Wasn't there something after my second one? Oh yeah, that our favorite company that we like to hate, Microsoft.
Oh yeah. So Microsoft, starting out with the Xbox, I briefly mentioned that there were safe game hacks and exploits for that. That was the easy way, and the original research was a lot more difficult. A person named Andrew Huang, Bunny, had done some absolutely bat crazy stuff with the original Xbox.
And I believe we have a video of something we can put on there. Because thanks to his exploits, you can put that in the Xbox. There it is.
So just activate file and copy it onto Xbox hard disk.
I don't know.
I'll just turn down the video audio.
Yeah. So basically, you load through a save file. You probably saw there's something called the Debian logo there, and it goes into this program, which basically makes it into a kind of PC.
Yeah, so this is the Evolution X dashboard. It was a reverse engineered, reassembled bootloader program for running Xbox homebrewing games. And yeah, rather insane stuff they were doing with the Xbox.
And then before we go on the juicy section, I just want to mention one other thing about Xbox. This is probably more pertinent to today. Who remembers the crazy camera that was known as Xbox Connect? Oh yes, they have them down there for the Dance Central off. So a lot of people were like, oh, it's like the Wii, we can track stuff with like AI sculpture and stuff, and we're just thinking, AI, always on camera, always on microphone, this is Google, this is their, like, and the AI, we know that it's not going to be built internally, so there has to be other companies they're bringing in, so we, myself would print out flyers and send them out to people like, hey, warning, your Xbox camera is always on, we don't know who has control, it could be spying on you, and Microsoft had to repeatedly go to the press, letting people know it doesn't spy on them. Until about, what was it, like 6 or 8 months ago, where ex-employees from third-party companies were like, we heard so many husband and wife fights and people playing naked in front of their TV and stuff like that through the Xbox Connect, and just never reported on, but we would just eat chips and watch. So,
yeah. So basically the things that Alexa and Ring doorbells were doing.
And real quick, just as a warning, there's kind of a sequel to that Sony might do. There's actually a patent going around where they have sort of a Siri type AI apparently that's might have a PlayStation 5 where if you like have a hard time facing a boss, it will then be like Clippy from Microsoft. Hey, we noticed you're having time with the boss. Do you want to do this technique or this technique? Except part of its database is, hey, you're having trouble with this boss. You know there's a microtransaction that's on the store that will allow you to bypass that. So just when we thought something like Connect or whatever would be bad, just please hope that they don't do that.
Yeah, so despite the laws on the books that say that companies need to be upfront with you about your privacy with them, your data on their servers, your data being shared from their servers, it's still very important that you are aware of what's going on and keep in touch with, you know, the underlying tone of these things.
Yeah, you need to know like what your rights are, what you can do if your phone gets hacked or you feel compromised, or this can happen to anybody.
So first off, I'm just going to say that you agreed to have all that happen to you. It's in the privacy policy, it's in the terms of service, that 61-page sleeping pill that you just scroll through, hit I agree, and go into the next page, next. Yeah, that, you just pretty much told them that you implicitly want them to do this to you.
So what would you be able to do about that?
One of the things you can do to prevent this from happening to you is just be aware that it's happening. And if you don't like it, tell them to...
Yeah, that's exactly why this is actually going to be part of a raffle we'll do at the end, or like afterwards. We want to do a shout out to the EFF. They're called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. They are a group of whistleblowers who look out for your own digital and privacy rights. They fight a lot of battles for everyone, and you can check out and go to some laws. There's also a really great website, by the way, because I think I should bring this up now, called privacytools.io.
Actually pull up the website.
Okay. Can you hand me the Tamagotchi over there?
Oh, yeah.
So, quick question before we move on, because we're going to get to some really juicy stuff in a minute. How many people actually read the FAQ for the PAX website? I knew there was going to be like...
I'm seeing like not even 20 hands.
So if you go on there, they ask, hey, could you use public Wi-Fi? And it's like, you could, but everyone's going to be on it. Now, don't be alarmed. We brought this really cute device. It's called Tamagotchi. You have it upside down. It's like it's a little Tamagotchi. It's happy. We named it Zelda. Lower it a bit.
Everyone wants
and
a
it seems
Wi-Fi
nice. It's connected to a Raspberry Pi Zero. It's a type of microcontroller. And what it actually does is it goes and says, hey, your phone does not have a VPN or something protecting it. I'm going to attempt to talk to it. Now, we can't see like passwords and emails and stuff, but if it does what's called a handshake where it connects, we're basically kind of logging those to the con because we want to see how many people actually are securing their phones.
And sorry that the camera's back.
Yep, and we're going to do a website. You look so cyberpunk in this. We're going to actually bring it up in a moment. But yeah, no, we're going to be experimenting with that throughout the con. So if you don't want to be on the Tamagotchi, go to privacytools.io, click Android or iOS, and it gives you a bunch of lists of free stuff that you can use to easily protect yourself.
Rather famously, DEFCON does this every year with their wall of sheep and the very interesting things that people look on conference Wi-Fi that I cannot say in a PG talk.
Okay, so let's go through this. So, quick question: who here loves DRM?
Nobody.
Good. I was waiting for like one exec to be like, "Nay, this is my moment."
Now, our lawyers said that we have to. We can't not like DRM because it's important and necessary for the businesses to make their money.
No. I mean, so, getting for a thing of DRM here, NCommander is going to talk a bit about one of the first types of DRM, or modern DRM, which is secure ROM.
Do we really have to?
Just say a few sentences.
Secure ROM, how to ruin your computer and free clutch it less. This was back in the days when we used to install games from CDs, and the concept was that secure ROM was copy protection for your CD-ROM drive. It did this by doing horrible, horrible things to Windows, like, I don't know, hacking the kernel, installing a driver, bricking your CD-ROM drive, and requiring limited activations. This rather famously brought Spore from 5 to 1 stars on Amazon, if you remember this.
So after that happened, I think you just made a guy's day or made his nightmare. There's probably a DRM that you're more familiar with. It's called, is it Genovo? I call it Doo-Doo. If you've ever been on Steam, this DRM gets kind of compiled on, and it's really terrible. It now gets cracked really fast, but this is one of the cracking groups that actually did this on the side. But to note is that it also makes your game terrible. So note the no Dunovo one, and now the one with Dunovo, the file size change. That's what you're adding onto the game. It also will make it run slower or more terrible. If you have nothing to compare it to, you wouldn't know about it. And actually, this cracking team, they cracked this game because they wanted to see if they could strip the DRM out of it, because there was rumors, particularly from the Ubisoft side, that it actually does impact performance. And it turns out it does, despite what their press release says. So you can see how long the load times are and stuff without that. Again, we're not going to go into details of how it's cracked because that would be illegal. But I can bring up something that's actually, believe it or not, worse than this, and that is called the Universal Windows Platform. This is Microsoft's proprietary thing. It's not really used in Windows anymore. Actually, can you pause it here? But but any Microsoft first-party thing, particularly get Xbox, is on this platform. Not only does it do all the encryption stuff that de novo does, try not to hack it or rip it, and it takes up a lot of space, a ridiculous amount of space. It also checks with Microsoft servers, that always online DRM they try to pitch for the Xbox One, to make sure everything's connected. This was really difficult to try to figure out and crack. Kind of the first ones you start playing the video was they would use a thing called PowerShell, which is like a terminal thing in Windows, to basically say, hey, it's okay, and then check the server, and then you could get things like Forza Horizon 4 running.
If you remember Windows Live games for Windows Live, that was basically version 1 of all this stuff.
Version 2 added Metro from Windows 8.
Yep. And then to kind of cap it off before we go into a really fun topic, this is the meat and potatoes of this talk. Does anyone remember the Lizard Squad incident? I really hope you weren't affected by that. Lizard Squad is a group of, there's a term we use in hackers called skids. These are people, they might know some technical skill, they might have high-powered hacker tools, but a lot of them are actually real-life kids who just, hey, it's like, hi, my dad's gun, I'm going to use it on everything, and that's how they use software. And so Lizard Squad was a group of literal teenagers around the world, and they were using what's called DDoSing, which is sending fake data to make sure games couldn't connect online. So they kicked Destiny offline, World of Warcraft for a bit, then decided, hey, we want to go for the big leagues, and they decided on Christmas, I can't remember which year it was, but on Christmas a couple years ago, they just knocked PSN and Xbox Live Online for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. They didn't go down until a hacker who's also a gamer, Kim.com, who owns Mega.com, which is like a place to download videos and stuff, offered them free membership, and then they stopped. So then they went, hey, we are now elite hackers, we are in the media, I know what we should do. We should try attacking the Tor network. The Tor network is a really awesome privacy thing that's made by the Tor project, it's supported by the EFF, that makes when properly done, makes a lot of your stuff really anonymous, really hard to break. They tried to hack it, and they failed. And I think the statute of limitations might be up on this, but I will say that I can't confirm or deny that I saw a lot of gamers who were really affected by this at Christmas Day, and also was really mad that they attempted to try to do this. And I may or may not have worked with a group of hackers that realized, hey, they actually do a terrible job of hiding their tracks, and those hackers might have then figured out where they are, who they are, and then was like, hey, Interpol, do you want a present? Here you go, and that was the end of them.
Allegedly.
Sure, that's cool.
So I think if they had something to say here, they would say, you're welcome. But let's get into something really cool. So if you will, Super Mario Brothers 3 here.
Yep.
So who has checked out the speedrunning thing downstairs? I love this type of stuff. So there's a lot of crazy things you could do with games that makes speedrunning really fun. So I think this is World 7.1, so we're just gonna watch this play through. So he goes in, moves some enemies, does things with the shell. What is that? Did Mario just glitch the Matrix? What's going, oh, we're at the end of the game.
Yep.
This
is what's called an arbitrary code execution exploit. And basically what they did was corrupted the game's state so much using only the inputs from the controller to absolutely wreak havoc and destroy the game by rewriting its code from within the game engine.
There's no external tools for this. It's all done in the game. Basically, and you can play the Super Mario Bros. World video here. Hopefully there's no audio. As you can see on the left, there's different X and Y values for the different sprites. That's a different movement. So what you do is you go in certain places, move certain items. He's going to get Yoshi in Super Mario Bros. World. And as you can see here, he's like setting up all the enemies in different spots. And all those numbers and letters are different code that is being written in real time. Now, once you have the code written, you're like, and you'll notice actually something here, the screen shift over, that means, uh-oh, it's starting to break. When you start covering how you do that, well, you use an exploit. And this exploit is, the game was never told what happens if you eat a charging chuck. Like, it's because it's impossible to do. But if you drop an item while charging chuck jumps at you, it will accidentally eat both of them. And then the game's like, this is not part of the script. What do we do here? It didn't tell us. Well, there's a bunch of code here written on this side, maybe that, and congratulations, you have beaten the game 100%. Woo, great job! Hey!
So yeah, arbitrary code execution is powerful, and it's one of the ways that hackers get into computer systems and break things too. It's not just limited to video games.
Yep, so now I'll load up Doom real quick because I love this part. So you're probably thinking, oh, Super Mario Bros. World, that's like, new. It's not just that whole game. It's not a new game, but what? Okay. This is Doom 2016. And in the same way, if you've ever seen Super Mario where they can like jump through walls, because of the way the level structure is in Doom 2 2016, you can actually like push yourself through walls and then just jump through the levels and pass huge parts of it. If I remember correctly, one of the records I heard is that you can finish this game in 20 minutes now, in terms of speed running. So with that being said, and we should do this part, one last video. Now that you know that you can click through stuff, exploits, and code injection, I want to show you the funniest, most fun video, Castlevania.
Oh yeah.
One that I've ever seen. It'll take a minute, but it's worth it. Which is the speed run where they did Castlevania Symphony of the Night in 5 minutes. It's not going to be the full 5 minutes thing. So first of all, you enter a certain name. That will come important later. So the thing is, in order to do the arbitrary code injection, we need to get to the castle. So first we need to get there. This is called moonwalking. When players realize that backdashing and cancel out actually makes you move faster now. He's going to jump into this and equip and declip and whoa! What was that? Well, it turned out that when you hit an enemy backwards and you equipped and declipped items, it was never told what to do, so the physics engine just says, F it, do it live, and we'll do a knockback that will send you all the way across the level, and you're going to see that again. So he goes over, he's going to backdash into this, he's going to go unmove and just do that, and he's holy, Thank you for flying, Hacker Airlines. Now, he's getting to the first stage room because he's in the castle now. When he's going to save, he's going to do a glitch where he's going to restart the game at, I think it's like 2.5 seconds. And see that name there? That's a dev name. Now he's in the development mode. So all the spaces here that were locked for items are now open. So he's going to rearrange some items. He's just going to write a bunch of arbitrary code. It's a lot of items. He's just going to go through this and
just moving empty items.
And then after he moves some items, he's going to move the last one in place.
Writing code with items.
And let's see, move that anti-venom there. Good. And we're going to relics. And congratulations, you have now beaten Castlevania Symphony of the Night 100%. So, to close things out, who wants to see some really fun, cool exploits that you do, particularly with like online stuff and direct cheating? Awesome. So, here's the first one. This is funny. So, I guess we say a lot of hackers are gamers. There's a group that's called the Cult of the Dead Cow. I'm associated with them. They're really awesome guys. They love High Def Veggie. It's a hacker name. Okay, this will be quick. And have you ever played, who's played Team Fortress 2? Like all the room, yeah. So when you're in the game, probably one time there was a guy who was just shooting at you, and you were like, oh man, that must be a hacker. He must be using an aimbot, like a program that aims all the time. Turns out, probably something much simpler than that. In source engine games, all the sound files are all saved, like no encrypted, right, like once you install it.
They were. I think they changed it.
Yeah, they changed it later, but that was last source game. So you can load up the Team Fortress 2. So the spy has to cloak and decloak in order to decloak in order to hit you. So there's a sound effect for it. Listen. You couldn't hear it. Like even with bullets and stuff, you'd never be able to hear that. Now let's replace the sound file, call it the same name, and see if we could find that spy again. So sometimes it's just that simple. If you want to do something on your mobile game, load up go back to Game Guardian. With mobile games, there's actually an entire program that's called Game Guardian, and what you do is you put it in the same virtual space and load the game, and you can just change the value. So you want to give yourself like $1 billion in game currency? Well, guess what? You can do that. That's one of those things. And crazy enough, real quick, Game Guardian was created not to be like piracy, crazy hack stuff. There's a bunch of gamers that love mobile games like Call of Duty Mobile and stuff who are really mad about the microtransactions. They just want to play the game. So they literally created that.
Like the energy stuff. Yeah.
Just to play it. Sorry for going a little bit fast, but we're running out of time. There will be the raffle thing. Can we show off one last thing, actually? Because we had a ton of stuff, but we'll get into this. So, who played Red Dead Redemption? And don't look quite late. So, we were going to do a thing on Fallout 76. That was kind of the joke. We unfortunately are running a long time. If we have a little bit more time, if they're generous, we will show that in a bit. But there's a problem that we have at modern games where no one updates their tools and engines. So, Red Dead Redemption 2, great game. The online, once you pass the encryption, turns out the online engine is the exact same as Grand Theft Auto Online, which has a lot of cheats in it. So
it was broken.
Yeah. So so when they realized that, it's like, oh, what we'll do is we'll spawn a bunch of bears, throw a stick of dynamite, harvest their pelts, and sell them the money. But the values were off. So instead, we got bears. The bear apocalypse. Endless bears, just bears as far as the eye can see. bears and endless cougars and let's see if it shows up. Endless cougars and naked women with bonnets wielding shotguns were immune to damage. And two-headed skeleton monsters, which were not used in the original game, for 6 hours across the entire online world. It was amazing. So
yeah, the entire game was pretty much broken by that point.
Point?
So again, I don't know if we're on the time thing.
We're
okay.
we're on the
So sorry, but we still want to do we can ask your questions outside, and all you guys got raffle tickets. We will also do it outside. We have a bunch of RFID wallets, which will shield stuff from there, as well as pins and stuff. And I think that's it. Yeah, so you can check us at DEFCON21.org. You can follow us on Twitter and Mastodon. And, the Warriors are here. The Warriors are here. Big shut down.
Alright, so that was our PAX East thingy. Let me just turn down the volume on the monitor here. So, I hope you all enjoyed that. That's actually, hold up. Sorry about the alarm. That was my reminder that the stream was over. So, on to other news. This is our last stream that we'll be featuring on Mixer. As you've probably heard by now, Mixer is owned by Facebook. They went through a hostile takeover, and it's pretty much an FTL game, for the lose, by the way. Regardless, because we're not going to be streaming on Mixer anymore, I figured that I would play it off with a ode, just to set the mood. So, without further ado, to Mixer. So, yeah, that wraps up our stream for tonight. Let me just make sure there's nothing else I must have missed, because we have a protocol set, and once we're done here, I will be rating whichever stream Side Pocket actually put up here. We are close to end now. Raid command. Yeah, I got him on dial here, so he's currently out of commission at the moment. I'm taking over for the stream. Kind of a novice at this whole streaming business, but whatever. I carry it along as I can. I've used OBS before. I kind of know what I'm doing. I'm sure I won't screw this up, So, yeah. I definitely, absolutely know what I'm doing. Wait, what the? No, that's not. There we go. There we go. Much better. So, yeah. Let me just pull up the browser and do our raid in the Twitch. And then with that, we will end our stream, more than likely. Where did our stream go? If you can't tell, I've used Twitch maybe, I can count it less times than are on my fingers. Online channel. There we go. Flash raid book. Alright. Anyway, thank you for watching DEFCON 201 TV. We'll see you next time with, he had a program lined up sometime this week. This is where I fall apart. Bingo. Archfile, the Linux Perspective, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and yeah, thank you for watching. Have a pleasant rest of your night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.